World of railroading and the many facets in the industry, model railroading, and people in general. I am your announcer, Brian Ballou, and here is our host, the head of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Chief Electrical Engineer, Mr. John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Chicago Junction from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norge on Monday, December the 18th, the year 2017. Today, the panel will be talking about railroads and model railroads. And now, to start today's broadcast, here's our announcer, Mr. Brian.
Oh, thank you, John. And our chief dispatcher is still out, still under the weather, recuperating. So I'll be handling the duties tonight. Brian Ballou, I am a retired Navy chief and railroader, former conductor, locomotive engineer. I belong to the Chicago chapter, NRHS, and one of the directors. I belong to a couple of museums on different coasts, one for the Reading Company Historical and Technical Society, and for the other for the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum in San Diego, California. And an all-around train buff, mostly with Lionel and large scale. And to my right, I have
Ron Stock, a retired library director from Eisenhower Public Library. Foamer at heart and all-around train buff and interest in all types of gauges, but primarily HO.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Berry. I'm a retired Chicago police sergeant, a lifelong Lionel collector and operator. On a good day, people tell me I'm a foamer. On a bad day, they tell me I'm a rivet counter. I'm a member of the Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club, and I have passed the fondness of Lionel trains down to my grandkids.
Dave DeRuska, retired locomotive engineers, and also the Vice President Program Director of the Black Hawk Chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, member at large of the National Railway Historical Society, and also I have a blog called Player with Railroads, which discusses the history of railroading in Chicago.
So you can see we have a pretty diverse group amongst ourselves, and hopefully we'll be able to agree on maybe one or two items. As it is, just like you say, you be in a room full of people, make a statement about something, and just about everyone will have a different opinion. So.
Yeah, but think how dull the world would be if everybody didn't just flat out love Lionel trains.
Can't fight that.
Hey, let me start off with the big news at Metra.
Bingo.
The Metra Rock Island locomotive. Ooh. Metra decided, in honor of their retiring executive director, Mr. Don Orsino, to paint one of their locomotives in a style of the Rock Island Railroad, which Mr. Orsino started at when he began his railroad career. And the rail fan world is abuzz. They can't wait for the train to get out there so they can take pictures of it. And already the real diehard fans are going, but it doesn't say Rock Island on the side. I wish they'd put the stripe in a different place.
He's not kidding, folks. That's the way they talk.
Yep.
Oh,
artistic rivet counters.
Are they going to have one painted up like the CNNW and the Milwaukee Road now too? That would be really nice.
You got to lighten up before before Brian loses it completely.
Anyways, it's a little different. It's going to be running over on the Rock Island, and I don't know if they're going to cycle it around into the other districts, but that's the big news over at Metro. Yeah, I don't think they painted it red because of their budget problems.
No, well, then it would have been an empty can.
Do you think they brought the paint job in under $5,000?
Well, it was done internally, so I don't know. They did consult with who is it, Caterpillar now? What is Caterpillar? What is their division that used to be EMD called? It's Progress Rail.
Yeah.
Yeah, they consulted with Progress Rail on the colors.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I guess they still have the original information on the paint from when the Rock Island did their locomotives in that color.
Well, yeah, that would have still been in that one office up in LaGrange.
Yeah.
We were talking about.
So it's authentic. Ooh. But it doesn't have Rock Island on the side.
Authentic colors, if not authentic marking.
All right.
Well, do you have something to start off with, Ron?
Sure. A friend of mine gave me this movie, which you guys probably have seen it, but it was released under the title Other Men's Women, and it was done in 1931. American pre-code drama film directed by William Weller and written by Maud Fulton. The film stars Regis Tomei, Grant Withers, and Mary Astor, and features Joan Blondell, and was produced by Warner Brothers. The best part about the film, as far as I was concerned, was seeing all the steam engines in it that were all from the Southern Pacific. I'm assuming since it was shot in California, they used one of the local areas to film it. It's set around a railroad yard during the steam era. Obvious because of it was released in January 31, so the film was actually made in 30, and they have a lot of different scenes with the steam engines running. The central piece of one of the things that was interesting about this movie, and he didn't get main building, but James Cagney plays Ed, and he's not a major. You see him in it and you recognize it, but he's not the star of the movie. So it had to be very early in his career. I assume.
They were all working Poverty Row at that time.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it was in the height of the Depression, but it's a really cool movie. They feature a lot of the scenes center around the diner, which is just off the tracks, and the yard area, and then of course towards the end of the movie there's a flood going on, and one of the characters. One of the parts of the movie is that the engineer and fireman get in a fight, and the fireman is pushed off the train and becomes blind. So he's rather distraught, and he steals the engine and goes across the bridge, and the bridge collapses at the end of the movie.
Well, that sounds like was used in another movie called Tycoon.
Oh, okay.
No, John Wayne.
Yeah.
Where he was a railroad builder down South America. And they had to go through and a flood.
Okay.
And you have trees, and
yeah,
the train just made it across that bridge.
Okay. In this case, they weren't allowing trains, and the guy who was blind ran the train across the river, and at the very end, kaboom. So he got his wish. He died on an engine. But it had a lot of really good railroad scenes in it, especially from the steam era. And I was watching closely, so it did say Southern Pacific, and even if it didn't, their tenders were kind of unique for the way they were built. You could usually recognize the Southern Pacific tender on a steam
It was
engine.
either SP or Santa Fe.
Yeah, in that area. Possibly, they could have maybe had Union Pacific too, but probably not as much. Because those were the three main railroads that ran through Los Angeles and Burbank probably area where they probably filmed it. So anyway, it's a really cool movie. It was initially the title before release was called The Steel Highway, and then they changed the name to Other Men's Women. And so I'd recommend it as a view. It's out in the DVD. It's also featured with I think 3 or 4 other films from that era around the 30s that had some major actors in it. The second thing that I also have, I've been shopping a lot at Menards. Menards has been doing HO and Lionel buildings and has been selling them. This one is called Grandpa's House, and it's a 2-story house that's looks be perfect for a farmhouse in the era or just the home on the block. It's got a woman who looks like she's bringing pizza actually in, and there's a gentleman on the porch. There's a flower hanging flower basket also from the porch. The house is 2 stories. It's got a brick chimney, although the house is actually done in wood in a gray finish, paint finish. It has a front and back. It's got some trash and
Looks like a boarding house.
yeah, could be.
It would make a nice boarding house.
And neighbors on
Oh.
the back porch. I can't
Yes.
tell if they're possums or raccoons.
It looks like they're raccoons the way they're colored. They have the white and the black trim on them. Yeah, they're sitting on the back porch, the back steps, I should say. And
Yeah, you just need the red lantern hanging on the door.
yeah, and they got oil. It's an oil-fueled house because they got the oil can out there. It does come with lighting, so
Oh, then maybe it does have the red lantern.
yeah.
Interchangeable.
So anyway, I thought it was a real cool-looking house that for the era. It's
Speak-
I'd say 1920s, 30s house probably era.
Speaking of Menards, I got their Menards.com, and they're running a special now. If you buy anything from Menards.com in the train stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you get a World War II Army Jeep
Oh,
free as long as your purchase is over $20. It's not a bad-looking Jeep, and it's obviously fresh out of depot because it still has the shovel and the pick attached to the driver's side.
I noticed because I did see that they have quite a few different military vehicles that they have on flat cars that they're selling, as well as various box cars. And
They just added a M19 half-track with a howitzer in the bed. That was one of a couple of different improvised pieces of field artillery. They had one with a 75 millimeter howitzer in it, and they haven't come up with an M7 Priest yet. But I figure give them another year and they might.
They got a whole story on the side of this box about the house.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Grandpa's house. Grandma passed away. And he's been very lonely. But I think this woman coming up the steps is Cindy, which may be his daughter who's divorced now. I mean, there's this whole story here in like 1-point type. I need a microscope to read it. My God. Cindy is working full time during the week, but Grandpa's happy to watch his grandkids during the day. Whether sharing stories on the front porch, swing, or working with them in the model railroad in the basement. So there's a model railroad in the basement.
The only thing, I wonder if they got sound for the model railroad.
Don't know. Actually, the oil drum on the side for the heat is I can't. Yeah, it's a oval end cap. So that's the 275 gallon oil tank that was very common in houses in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Sunday just passed, Sunday the 10th, the Historic Pullman Foundation had their candlelight house tour, and the Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club was asked to send.
I understand we have somebody call in.
David.
Dave, save us.
Hello? Dave?
Well, the caller's name is Dave. That much I know.
David, are you there? Oh, hang on.
Lights flashing again. We have flashers.
Cool.
David, are you there?
In this kind of weather, man of steel.
Okay, just a moment.
While we wait for the miracle of electronics.
Was that the end of failsafe?
If this had been an actual alert, you would have been told to tune.
That's Sunday. We were in historic Pullman running trains. They had 5 houses on display: an executive house, a foreman's house, one of the row houses, the Greenstone Church, and another house. I don't remember which one it was. And we were in the old. It had been the Masonic Hall at 614 East 113th Street. So there were two tables, a total of 4 trains running. And Tom McMahon and his son had his set and his son's set, and then I had the Polar Express and some other stuff, including a 73 Chevy Bel Air Chicago blue and white stopping Barbie in her Corvette.
Do we have somebody on the air? Hello, Dave, is this you?
Yeah,
All right, well, welcome on.
thank you.
Hi, Dave. It's Dave.
I've never been on before, so I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
Well, you wanted to talk about your book.
Okay, well, which one?
Well, I think when we emailed each other, it was the book coming out about the Baltimore and Ohio Chicago terminal.
Okay, well, I'm finishing up a book on the history of the B and OCT. And at first I was only going to take it up to 1915. Then I thought, well, I got to add this river straightening. And then I found some information on closing Grand Central. So I figured I'll just take it up to the end. And I'm working on getting photos, maps, drawings. That's pretty much the hardest part. But I've got it up to about 1910. I'm working on, and after that, there's not a whole lot of chapters. So that's basically it.
Yeah, it was before it was the B&OCT. It was a couple other railroads, correct?
Well, it started as the Chicago and Great Western, and that was owned by the Wisconsin Central. And then Henry Villard from the Northern Pacific got involved, and it became the Chicago and Northern Pacific. And he wanted it as a feeder line for the Northern Pacific. So he bought the Chicago Terminal and Transfer, which was the Belt Line, and that was purchased by the Northern Pacific. They couldn't buy the Chicago and Great Western because they had no track that connected, so they had to lease it. But once they leased it, then they had a foothold in Illinois and could actually buy the Chicago terminal and transfer. Unfortunately, they all went bankrupt in 1893. It was kind of a domino effect because the Northern Pacific, he was kind of over-exuberant in his spending, and when the recession came in 1893, it dragged the Northern Pacific down because they had leased the Wisconsin Central. They couldn't pay the rentals to the Wisconsin Central. Consequently, the Wisconsin Central went into receivership. And because the Wisconsin Central couldn't pay the Chicago and Northern Pacific, it followed into receivership. And then it was reorganized as the Chicago Terminal Transfer. And they were doing okay for a while until Harriman got involved. And what had happened is there was a railroad they were building between Chicago and St. Louis. Rockefeller was a big investor in the Chicago he was a big investor all the way through. He never really sold his shares from the Chicago and Great Western days. So anyway, he owned the Katy, and he wanted an outlet for the Katy in Chicago. And the Alton was not for sale. He tried to get the Alton, but they wouldn't sell. So he decided to invest in another railroad that was building kind of to parallel the Alton. Well, once the Alton realized what was happening, and there were some owners of the Alton who weren't happy, they sold out to Harriman and a syndicate. Well, they had already signed a lease with the Chicago Terminal Transfer, and when they bought the railroad, they had to assume the lease, and it was something like I think it was about $150,000 a year. So, when he had that lease, he had a lease for a railroad that didn't need it. So Harriman was looking around to see who else would take it, and he couldn't find anybody. At that time, the B&O was in Grand Central, and they did not have a lease. They just had a short-term lease. So rumors were that the B&O was going to go to the Union Depot, and that would have pretty much spelled the end for the Chicago Terminal Transfer, because their only other tenant at that time was the Chicago Great Western. The Wisconsin Central didn't go back to Grand Central after they got out of bankruptcy because they were asking too high of a lease. The Wisconsin Central went into the IC station. So anyway, the B&O, I don't know if it was true or if it was a bluff, but the B&O said, well, we're going to Union Station, and Harriman stepped in and said, well, I've got this St. Louis lease, and I'll be glad to offer it for you. And that's what he did. The B&O assumed the lease from the short line. It was called the St. Louis Short Line. Unfortunately, the B&O got Grand Central, or got the terminal privileges at much less than what they were worth, and over time, the Chicago Terminal Transfer also went belly up, and then it was assumed by the B&O, and that's pretty much the history of the line.
Now, the Chicago Terminal Transfer actually did run suburban service.
Oh, yeah. So did the Chicago and Great Western did, and then the Chicago and Northern Pacific did, and then, the Chicago Terminal Transfer, they went down to Chicago Heights. They built a branch to Chicago Heights, and they were, it was that line along near Western Avenue. Went all the way to Harvey, Blue Island, and then Chicago Heights. They also had suburban service to Oak Park and that, but it wasn't profitable for them, and they sold it to an electric railroad, the Suburban Electric, and the Suburban Electric electrified the line, or part of the line, and they even leased some track from the Wisconsin Central and electrified it from Cicero or Oak Park, where it ended. I think it was Madison Street, all the way to Thatcher's Park. But it didn't. They couldn't. Suburban couldn't make a go of it because the rental was too high, and so the Suburban went bankrupt, and they lost it, and eventually the franchise expired. The people were upset because they were promised a 5-cent fare to the city into Grand Central, and once the Suburban got it, they stopped the 5-cent fare, and they didn't go into Grand Central anymore. So eventually the line got torn up. But the Chicago Heights line went on for quite a while.
Now, I live in Morgan Park, and I've seen photographs of the stations along that line. Some pretty nice stations. The one at the cemetery at 115th Street was a very nice station.
Yeah, they did. They had a nice string of stations. They were they gave a 5-cent fare down there also, and the reason kind of was when Henry Villard owned or was a big investor in the Chicago and Northern Pacific. He bought a lot of land. At that time, there was real estate. Everybody figured real estate you couldn't lose. It was one of those kind of deals. So they bought lots of lots and lots of land for subdividing and manufacturing and everything. And after the Panic of 1893, the railroad was stuck with all this land, and the best way to get rid of the land was to offer a cheap fare so that subdividers would come in and subdivide the land they owned, and hopefully they could sell it at a good price.
Now, you had mentioned you've written other books or book.
Well, I wrote the first one was just a book on Waupaca, Wisconsin, which was interesting because it had 3 railroads there. It had a little short line, Waupaca Green Bay Railroad, and it was built to haul potatoes. At that time, Waupaca was the leading potato area of the United States. And then they also had an electric line there. And if you want to know more about potatoes, I'll be talking about potatoes at the Short Line Club tomorrow night.
Yeah, Doug Kanyuk is one of our panelists. He's not here this evening, but he's affiliated with the Short Lines.
Yeah. And then I wrote a book. I was always interested in the pickle industry, believe it or not. And I wanted to, I'm a model railroader, so I wanted to model the pickle industry. So I would go to train shows and ask, do you have any books on pickles, on the pickle industry? And everybody said, no, there wasn't one. So I started the search, and there wasn't one. Nobody had ever written a book on pickles or a kind of a history book. There were books on how to make pickles and how to, recipes and that sort of thing, but that didn't interest me. So I started researching the pickle industry. And then I found out that Chicago was the largest producer of pickles for many, many, many years. Because of our transportation and because pickles were easily grown in Wisconsin and Michigan. Those were the number 1 and 2 pickle growing states. And then hand in hand with the pickle industry was the vinegar industry, because at that time half the vinegar made went to the pickle industry. So I decided to write a book on pickle and vinegar, and I looked for as many photos as I could find, and then I did some research, and I had these little thumbnail sketches of all the Chicago pickle companies like Clausen and Budlong, and there were quite a few more, and then a little bit about Heinz and that, and so I wrote a book on the pickle industry. It was fun to do. It was very interesting.
Dave, I need to interrupt you for a second. We have to stop for station identification.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
You're listening to Chicago Junction on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norge and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Monday, December the 18th, the year 2017. And this is Jack Frost 89.7 WRHS FM Norge and Jack Frost 88.1 FM WXMS Harwood Heights. And now back to Chicago Junction and our panel.
I hope you guys got your things done during the break. All right, we're still on the air with Dave, and
We never got Dave's last name, though. All the time we've been communicating, we've never...
It's Leiter. David Leiter.
Did you do a presentation for the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society about the pickles?
Yeah, I've done. I do a lot of presentations.
Okay.
I like to talk. I was never a teacher. I was never. Actually, when I was in high school and college, I was very shy, and I didn't like to, talk in front of people. And then I got a job where I kind of had to, and then I started giving these talks on things, and I don't know, I started enjoying it. So I give about 10 to 15 talks a year on different subjects. So.
Well, it's interesting that listening to you talking about the pickle, because I actually did read about the pickle industry. I grew up in the East Coast, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Long Island was a great pickle manufacturing place.
There's actually a section of the book about Long Island, about the pickle industry on Long Island. I found someone who had written it, and I asked his permission, and he said, sure, go ahead and use it. So.
Well, that's probably the one that I read.
Oh, it could be.
Because it was in conjunction when I found out they did a story on one of the train wrecks they had on the Long Island, and it ended up at the pickle factory.
Oh, okay.
There was a lot of brine all over the place.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They were in a pickle.
Yes, they were.
Dave, you mentioned that you were a modeler. Have you seen the Woodland Scenics pickle factory that they're selling through Menards?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, there was one thing about pickle factories, there was no standard. Every pickle factory was different. And the reason is they could add or subtract tanks very easily. The tanks were just assembled on site, and you could take one down. So if you had a good harvest and you needed more tanks, you'd order some more tanks. And if you didn't need them, you could take them down and sell them or whatever. So pickle industries are very, each one is different. No two are alike.
We should swap stories sometimes. I had a summer job in college where I worked at a pickling plant.
Oh, yeah, which one?
It's place is called Tree Pickles. It was out east, outside of Buffalo, New York.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought you were going to talk about the Anchor Bar down the street.
no, no, I ran the capper machine. I had a very important job.
Yeah.
So what is the title of your books? How would people find them?
Well, the first one, the Wapaka book, is I'm not selling it. I only have I think 5 copies left. The other two, it's the Wisconsin Central in Illinois, and Doug was kind enough to make a web page for me.
Ah, okay.
And the other one is Pickle and Vinegar Makers of the Midwest. So you could Google pickle makers or pickle and vinegar makers, and you'll come to it. And I'm selling that one on eBay. The Wisconsin Central book, I'm not selling on eBay right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a Facebook page, so we always include information about our guests, and
okay.
So we'll include that.
All right. And I'm working on, I'm gathering the research on the Chicago Milk Shed, and I don't know if your listeners know what the Chicago Milk Shed is.
Mm-mm.
We're palpitating.
Yeah.
We really want to know.
The Chicago Milk Shed is where Chicago got its fluid milk from. And it started way back in the very beginning. Most of the milk for Chicago came from the local, the farms or people in Chicago, Mrs. O'Leary's cow, for instance. And as the city grew, they kind of discouraged having milk cows in the city, so the city had to go farther and farther out for milk, and they came up with what they called the Chicago Milk Shed, and they had a lot of regulations on milk and its shipping, and any farmer who wanted to ship to Chicago had to abide by these rules, and most of the milk came from what was considered the milk shed. It went all the way up into Wisconsin. It went over to Iowa. Not much milk came from Indiana, and a little bit from from Illinois, south. So I'm working on that, and the hardest part for that book is finding milk car photos. I was lucky that I found a lot of pickle car photos and vinegar car photos. I mean, I have lots and lots, but Chicago, for some reason, there aren't a lot of milk car photos. There weren't a lot of, Bowman had some cars and that, and a lot of milk was just shipped in refrigerator cars, so it's kind of hard to tell, from the outside what was in it. But it's a fascinating story, just like the pickles, how all this milk came to Chicago and where it went, how it was distributed.
Yeah, I believe there is a milk car out at IRM.
There is.
In the back 40.
Yeah, Flouder car. And that was a company that made milk cars commercially, and then I think it's a Borden's car, isn't it?
I think it is.
Oh, wait, there's a Borden's car and there's a Flouder car. A Flouder, they made cars that looked like refrigerator cars, but they had glass tanks.
They had the glass
inside.
tanks in. Yeah, Lionel makes a beautiful model of that.
Right.
There is a milk car in St. Louis at the Museum of Transportation. You might want to reach out to them and see what resources they have.
Okay.
And if you can spare the time to drive down to St. Louis, treat yourself to a whole day walking around down there, because it's a great little museum.
I was there many years when the NMRA, the National Mile Railroad Association, had a convention down there, and I don't recall, in the 1990s sometimes, and I went over there to the museum and spent a couple hours over there. But at that time I wasn't interested in milk cars, so I probably saw it and I just, walked right by it. Didn't realize what it was.
They have it they have it ramped and opened up so you can actually get up in there and walk around inside of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if they don't have photographs, stick your Polaroid in your back pocket and go take some pictures.
Did you ever consider contacting the B&OCT group on Facebook?
I did. I was a member for a while, and then all of a sudden I disappeared as a member, and I tried to get back as a member, and for some reason they never responded. So I don't know if they had some technical difficulties or what. But I am working with Nick Fry from the B&O Historical Society. Okay. And I've sent him the first 9 chapters of the book. And, I mean, he's a busy guy, and he said he read part of it and he liked it. He said the research was good. And so I hope to work with them. Or actually, I'm going to go to Maryland to try to find some answers to some questions I have.
Well, it sounds like you're a busy guy.
Yeah, I am. Fortunately, I have a great job where I get laid off every winter. So I get to go on unemployment. I better not don't tell anybody. But then I go back in the spring. It's a guaranteed job, so
okay, well,
works well for me.
Well, thanks so much for calling in.
All right.
And we wish you luck on your projects. And
thank you.
Hope to talk to you again soon when the book is done.
All right. It'll be a while, a couple years probably. But
well, hopefully we'll still be here.
Yes.
All right.
So, but definitely call back, and thank you for the good information, especially with the other books that you've done.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Ah, that was pretty good.
Milk and pickles.
Milk and pickles,
Yum.
you normally don't get that.
No.
Ice cream and pickles, so technically that's milk and pickles.
It's like a pregnant show.
Ain't going there.
What next?
I don't know. What are you?
Oh yeah.
You've got
another saga in the Iowa Pacific Holdings story.
Oh jeez.
Yeah. Iowa Pacific Holdings, the Chicago-based railroad operator, contracted to use the Santa Cruz branch line rail line, confirmed Wednesday that it will be pulling out of its contract with the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, corroborating months of rumors that the company was backing out. Essentially, they are $60,000 into debt to the commission for unpaid royalties from the Polar Express holiday train from last year, and also for fees for the storage of rail cars in Watsonville. Now, we know that Iowa Pacific isn't really a railroad. It's basically a storage facility for rail cars. They store cars on all the properties that they own, annoying people, annoying communities, annoying businesses. There was a controversy here in Chicago where their line over in what is that area, that industrial area that is around North Avenue? I forget the name of it, but anyways, they decided one day to just pull a bunch of cars in there and just leave them. Now the rail line isn't used anymore. There's no industries in there that need rail service, but Iowa Pacific still owns the tracks. The city has been trying to get them to vacate the tracks, and in response, Iowa Pacific decided that, no, we're going to put some cars in here, blocking the streets and doing other things. So they said, well, we'll gladly move the cars if you pay us X amount of dollars. So they're not, Ed Ellis and Iowa Pacific is not the good neighbor people. So now they're pulling out of Santa Cruz, and it looks like they're not going to pay off their debts. But the trail people are very interested in the tracks.
Yeah, surprising.
Somebody needs to drop a dime to Lincoln Park towing on them.
No, see, but that's why the trail people love them, because it gives us a reason. Oh, that's going to make us look good.
Yeah, it says, meanwhile, trail-only advocacy groups such as the Santa Cruz County Greenway and Trail now have a vested interest in RTC failing to find a new contract agreement for the railway in the corridor. So it goes. Hey.
Always. Let's see. We were talking about Progressive Rail. Well, apparently, they did a couple of naughty things. Apparently, they were overcharging for repairs in California.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're on the hook for $25 million in fines. Capital and restitution after company officials pleaded guilty on the company's behalf on defrauding freight car owners on repairs. Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday that United Industries, a unit within the California's Progress Rail Division, accepted a plea deal with federal prosecutors, admitted that its employees made fraudulent or unnecessary repairs. Now, who would do that? To freight cars that visited the shops near the port of Long Beach, California. The Wall Street Journal reported that the United employees used hammers to break brake components, chisels to damage wheel treads, and chains to yank loose the safety appliances. To conceal evidence of the damage, they even dumped certain parts into the Pacific Ocean, prompting a federal charge of dumping refuse in navigable waterways.
But the fish liked it. It's like fish homes.
Yeah. All of a sudden, you got the new reef. And newspaper reports the dumping occurred in 2008-2009, while the criminal investigation first came to light in 2013. They actually put divers down, and they actually found a lot of the parts. Without the octopus. Let's see. Senators seek to reauthorize Crest Investigation Board. Reauthorize. Bill to reauthorize the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, changes to which will obligate the agency to share more data gathered during investigations, not saying it after the investigation when they got all the data, to give it more so they can keep spreading it out more and let everybody know what they're doing. According to a news release from the Senate Commerce Committee, legislation filed December 6th will require the board to release a written depiction of visual information or still images collected from a video recorder. Release shall be made at a public hearing, or if there is no hearing, at a time when other significant information has been collected. The bill protects confidential information. The bill will also, and then of course they decide what is confidential information. We know how the Senate is. They're very good at that.
Yeah.
The bill will also allow majority of the board members to meet behind closed doors, discuss official business, provided they meet certain disclosure requirements. In addition, the NTSB will be required to disclose the methodology used to determine its annual most wanted list of transportation safety issues. This is the first authorization of the 50-year-old NTSB since 2006. The bill also authorizes a budget of $113.3 million through 2023. The bill is receiving strong bipartisan support. Man charged with trying to steal Union Pacific locomotive. In Phoenix. Man is facing charges in Phoenix after attempting to steal a locomotive in early November. Tucson. Television stations cites a Union Pacific representative saying that on November 8th, a 20-year-old man drew attention to himself after he broke into the cab of a locomotive in the Phoenix yard and was found blowing the horn and pushing buttons and moving levers. The police officers removed the man when they arrived on the scene before he was able to begin moving the locomotive. He was released from jail on the same day of his arrest and told officials that he had no prior interest in trains or employment history with the rail industry. New exhibition. Milwaukee Road Beer Line exhibit makes hometown debut November 30th. Up in Milwaukee, beer has long been the defining trait of Wisconsin life and culture, and the state's history with brewing is intertwined with its railroads. To shine a light on both, the Center of Railroad Photography and Art will open its Milwaukee Beer Line exhibition at Lakefront Brewery starting November 30th. The first appearance in Milwaukee, the exhibition travels to the Lakefront Brewery following a brief tour in the Madison area. It has appeared at the East Troy Electric Railway Museum, the Octopi Brewing, and Grumpy Troll Brewery. The show will be on display at the Lakefront Brewery through the February 5th during business hours. The exhibition features 1950s era photographs from the center's Wallace W. Abbey collection. In celebration of the exhibition's opening, the Lakefront Brewery will hold an opening reception for the show's unveiling. The event is free and open to the public beginning at 6 p.m. The event will feature a limited edition tap called Smokestack Smoked Lager, available for a one-day special in conjunction with the exhibition opening.
So, coal-flavored beer?
Yep.
Or maybe some diesel fuel thrown in.
Well, if it's got the slick on it, then we know the diesel fuel's been added.
Kevin's got something. What you got there, Kevin?
Well,
Go let Kevin talk. Come on.
Yeah, well, I was going to finish that.
please, no, go ahead and finish it.
No.
All right, I was looking for something to dress up the Christmas layout. You've seen the Christmas Day and Christmas Eve beep and caboose for the North Pole and Snowflake, and you've seen the Lionel North Pole Express flat car with Santa's plain deer. I wanted something new to add to it. I have a bright red Lehigh Valley hopper, and as someone just pointed out to me, the outside number is 25000. And I wanted to get an elf on the shelf to put in it because I thought it'd be cute having the elf on the shelf zipping around the train layout. Except Hallmark wants too much money. So I found these two little itsy bitsies that are $6.95 a piece, and it's Charlie Brown and Lucy, although they've got all of the Peanuts characters. And these come with a tie-in to Toys for Tots, so but when you buy an itsy bitsy from the Peanuts collection, there's a piece of it goes to Toys for Tots. So Charlie Brown and Lucy are in the coal hopper, and it's an eye catcher as it zips around the train loud. It got a lot of comments out at the Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club, and a lot of comments at one Christmas party. I brought it with me on Sunday to run it as part of the historic Pullman, but the other guy that was there was whining so much about running his Union Pacific M10,000 that I didn't get a chance to put this out on the track. But yeah, it's cute. My wife asked me today, are those supposed to be your grandson and granddaughter? I says, well, actually, it's Charlie Brown and Lucy, but it could be the kids. But for $15, you dress up a hopper with a couple of Christmas characters, and it just adds a seasonal touch to it. You know, it was a card that somebody gave me. They had a box of 12 pieces of Lionel rolling stock, and his grandson wasn't interested in trains. He said rather than throw it out or give it to Goodwill, he says, I know you still enjoy running your Lionel trains. Here, take these and give them a good home. So yeah, it's cute. I yield the floor.
I have two other things that I wanted to talk about. Most railroaders know about this, but just in case you don't, there's a company called Learning Tree, and you can find them
I think
on
it's Leaning Tree.
or
sir.
Leaning Tree. Excuse me. Yes.
Sounds like a railroad thing, leaning tree.
Yeah. You can find them on the internet, and they have every year they come out with quite a collection of railroad Christmas cards, and usually there's like 20 cards in the set, all various different railroads with nice drawn pictures. Sometimes they're Howard Fogg and some of the other famous train artists who do it, and the one that I currently have is called Santa's Express by Tom Newsman, and on this one, there's a total of 10 different Santa Clauses scenes, some of which he's playing with the trains, some he's an engineer on the train, others he's in the workshop. Anyway, all of them are really super cute and are a terrific card for Christmas. In addition, they also have scenes of various Western Eastern railroads, quite a few from Chicago. Chicago, Philadelphia, the Pennsylvania Railroad, Santa Fe, some of the major railroads in their when they're at their stations, and with a winter scene. So that's kind of cool. The other thing that I want to talk about, which I only just started reading about maybe a quarter of the book so far, it's a new book by Bill James, and Bill James is basically known as a baseball writer. He's a statistician and baseball information and statistics, and he's been doing books for probably 10 to 20 years. The current book that this is the first time I've seen him do a book on nonfiction. It's, the title of the book is The Man from the Train. The subtitle is The Solving of a Century-Old Serial Killer Mystery, and serial killings start taking place in around the turn of the century, around 1906, and go up to about 1920. And although he hasn't finalized, at least the part of the book that I have read, doesn't finalize his theories, you could sort of lead where he's going. This gentleman is a serial killer of families, number one, and they think if this actually is true, which I haven't concluded the book, so I can't say that, but he could be the most prolific serial killer ever in the United States. And he starts out in West Virginia, and quite a few of the serial killings are actually done in Iowa and in the Midwestern states. So, and every time there's a family murder, it's usually, back then it was on a farm, remote areas. Nobody really ever tied them together because there wasn't, the police didn't have a communications, and they were done in small towns. So consequently, local people oftentimes maybe got blamed for the murder, and it turned out that maybe it wasn't a local person, it was a guy or a group of people that were doing the murders going town to town. And that the railroads were involved in their both getting there and escaping from the scene of the crime, because most of the killings were associated within about 4 miles of railroad tracks. So I haven't finished the book, but it's sort of an interesting theory, at least starting out. That now I'm not certain after reading the first maybe 6 or 10 murders that if this is actually true or not, but it's a good theory, possibly.
If it's true, it's going to put a big dent in Harry Holmes's
reputation.
reputation.
Yeah, And actually, I was thinking it would have been a little bit further back, because more of that era, rather than say the 19. It starts in 1906, and I think it goes to about the 20s. Having looked a little bit in advance.
Well, that is quite interesting. And at this time, we need to take a station identification.
And you're listening to Chicago Junction on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich. And now back to Chicago Junction and our panel.
Is that your book or is that a library book?
Actually, this is a library book, and somebody told me about it. So both the movie and this is one of my friends who's a math teacher up at Oakton College mentioned it to me because he knows I'm interested in trains. Plus, Bill James being a baseball writer, I thought, and this is probably his first venture into a kind of novelesque true mystery. So
I'll have to see if I can get a copy of it through the Chicago Public Library.
it's been out maybe about a month or two, so it's relatively new.
Well, the book itself is
Yeah.
new? All right.
I'm
Who's the
always
author
looking for
again?
something to read.
Okay, it's The Man from the Train.
Yeah, author.
Bill James.
Okay, thanks.
And Rachel McCarthy James.
In the brand new, well, it's not new now, but in the 2017 Lionel Christmas catalog for Polar Express fans, they have the Polar Express Boy Heroes house from the movie.
back.
It includes the boy in the blue bathrobe and the scraggly snowman on the front lawn. There's only two houses that are shown in the entire movie, in detail. The first boy to get on the train, and then the boy that gets on at 11346 Edbrook. Now that's what they call an Easter egg. 11346 Edbrook is where Zemeckis lived when he was a child. That's Edbrook is a little street that only goes for 2.5 blocks, and it's between Michigan Avenue and Indiana Avenue, between 111th and 113th Place.
I didn't see the blue house. I saw the yellow house with the snowman out front.
And
the boy.
It's a
and
yellow brick house.
Yeah, and that's with the boy with the.
That's the first boy to get on.
Yeah, and that's his house. at
That's his
Lionel.
house. The second house, it's a white wooden-sided house. That's the house for the little boy that Christmas doesn't really work for me. Lives at. So there's hope that house will pop up in a year or two, because there's only two houses that are really shown in any detail in the movie. But the one that they're offering has got the snowman with the two stick arms and the mom's hot mitt on the one hand. And they have a Polar Express girder bridge and a Polar Express covered bridge as well in the catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have a pack of elves to add to the figures.
Okay. Back to more great news. General Electric seeks to sell locomotive building business. They're doing big things, basically paring down the General Electric company. They've already put their light division, which made the company originally, on the chopping block. They want to get rid of it. And the whole transportation arm they're going to be selling. They announced the plans to focus on 3 core industries: aviation, power, and healthcare. They says trains, nobody's buying trains anymore.
They're not.
No, because they've overloaded and because there's not a lot of industry in the United States anymore.
Yeah, right.
You know, that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, that might. Well, we still get lots of stuff from China that we can put in containers and move around.
Yes.
And
But-
there's still commodities like coal, grain, but that's it's seasonal.
Oh
cyclical.
no! Remember, they don't want to do coal no more.
Oh no.
Remember, Mr. Hunter said.
Oh well,
Coal
Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, Mr. Hunter and several other. Oh, we don't really want coal. That's why we're closing down all the coal plants, and we're going to do gas.
Oh, the president had something different to say about that today.
I have no idea what he said today.
He said, the
Anyway,
coal industry is back. Good, clean American coal.
well, basically, he's not far from wrong. Now, it's just like with the steel industry. We could still have that stuff, but the guys didn't want to spend the money to put the proper cleaning gear in and scrubbers and stuff. Oh, we're going to make more money when we ship it overseas. But now that it's been there for 20 years, all of a sudden, then the cheap labor is not cheap anymore. It's a shame that all the rail that we buy to repair comes from overseas. So, it's the middle class we used to have is disappearing real fast.
The skilled labor we used to have is disappearing real fast.
Yes, sir. Oh. Yeah, we got, we're talking about the topics with those trailblazers.
Oh yeah, those guys that want to turn rails into trails.
Well, they built a new trail, Mount Washington Cog Railway, and it draws criticism from the trail groups. Brenton Woods, New Hampshire. Mount Washington Cog Railway is taking criticism for a trail it built on its own land. Lawyers with the environmental advocacy groups Keep the Whites Wild have asked Coos County commissioners to look at whether the railroad should have applied for and received a permit before they cleared a path to the top of the summit. The group opposes attempts to develop Mount Washington region and has taken particular issue with the Cog Railway's plans to build a lodge up at the top. The 40-room lodge. The railway president, Dwayne Bridges, told the New Hampshire Public Railroad that for now the railroad is using the 3-mile path as a shortcut for maintenance vehicles bound for the top of the mountain, not as a public road or hiking trail. It's very, very rough. It isn't likely you can drive a car or pickup truck or any types of those vehicles up there. It wouldn't go up the trail. Or a full-size track snow vehicle would have a hard time getting through. It's way too wide. So, yeah, everybody complained about something. Good news is Mid-Continent Railway is going to run its snow train next year, February 10th and 11th. Hopefully it'll snow up there. First time I went, it snowed pretty good. And they were using steam.
Speaking of, we will have one of the founders of that Mid-Continent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, not the Mid-Continent. I'm sorry. My mistake. Forget that.
Okay.
It's a different rail museum.
Okay, which one? we got a bunch around here.
Yeah. It's Monticello.
Oh.
Yeah, he's going to be speaking.
Monticello, okay.
Speaking at the Blackhawk chapter meeting on January the 5th.
Oh. That'll be a nice talk.
Yeah.
Well, what's his name?
No, I can't think.
I
didn't write these things down.
I asked the hard questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you do. Can't you float me some easy ones here?
Okay. Oh, I got a short line story, in memory of Doug.
Yeah?
Since he's not here, well, Indiana Short Line and town settled dispute over operations. The Surface Transportation Board has formalized a settlement that involves the Chesapeake and Indiana Railroad and its landlord, the town of North Judson, Indiana, and the Hoosier Valley Railway Museum of North Judson. Oh yeah, that three-way fix there.
Yeah.
The trackage is Erie Lackawanna. And the board ruled on November 28th that Chesapeake and India could discontinue operations on 5.45 miles of track between North Judson and English Lake, Indiana. The discontinuance means the town may host the railroad excursion trains outside of STB jurisdiction without impeding the short line's growing freight business. North Judson in 2003 took ownership of 28 miles of CSX Transportation, formerly C&O rail line between North Judson and Wellsboro in northwestern Indiana. Chesapeake is owned by the Indiana Boxcar Corporation. Began operations in 2004. 2016, a long-simmering dispute between the short line, the town, and the museum over the museum's access to the railroad became public in a tangled litigation STB petitions. The museum charged that the Chesapeake and Indiana was barring excursion trains contrary to its agreement with the town. Chesapeake and Indiana said the museum violated certain federal railroad administration safety rules, and it did not want to be held liable if passengers were injured while riding museum trains. The C&I operates primarily on the northern section of the railroad line, providing service to two large elevators in Malden and Union Mills, owned by the Clow Alliance LLP. Traffic has grown from a few hundred carloads in 2004 to more than 4,000 cars so far in 2017. Indiana Boxcar President Powell Felix tells Train News in an email. Felix says he is expected greater growth in 2018 with gypsum deliveries to a new wallboard factory. It uses additional trackage in La Crosse, Indiana for cars stored. Oh! Following the Iowa Pacific.
It's the new business.
Yes. In September, the town and the railroad negotiated an agreement that will allow C&I to operate for the next 10 years. Felix says the town receives a lot of revenue from the railroad operations, but declined to say an exact figure. It's unclear how the settlement will affect the Hoosier Valley Museum. Museum officials had not responded to questions sent by email at the time the story was written. According to its website, 3 Santa trains are scheduled for December have been sold out.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's good short line news. Good. All right. Well, I believe it's about time we might call this coming to an end.
Yep.
We want to thank everybody for listening throughout the year. Please, if you'd like to hear any comment, please send any comments through our Facebook page, and we will try to answer any questions or anything. And thank you for listening, and join us again next year.
One final thought, sir.
Happy rails to you.
What's the final thought?
When you stop believing in Santa, no more toys, you get underwear.
As our express comes into the station, we want to thank you for joining us on our journey through our wonderful world of trains. Chicago Junction is a production of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and can be listened to on the web at www.windycityhometown.com, where you can listen to tonight's broadcast and all of our past episodes. Also sample some of the other programs that are being offered. I am your announcer, Brian Ballou. Until next month, when we journey again to Chicago Junction.
You have been listening to Chicago Junction on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Monday, December the 18th, the year 2017. Chicago Junction was produced by Jack Ryan, directed by John DeVita, and our special thanks to radio station manager Kevin Seflik of WRHS FM Norwich and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Chikanda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Thursday, December the 14th, the year 2017. Until next time, be safe and thanks for listening. And on behalf of the entire staff of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, WRHS FM Norwich, I wish each and every one of our great listeners a very, very, very merry, happy Christmas and a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year. This is Jack Frost, 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, and Jack Frost, 88.1 WXMS Howard Heights.